Our story begins in Corinth, Mississippi, and centers on a man named Paul Kevin Curtis, though for the sake of the narrative, the initial script referred to him as Casey. Kevin, as we'll call him, was about 33 years old in 2001. By night, he was a dedicated professional Elvis impersonator, touring and performing under the name The King of Entertainment. He had the charisma, the moves, and the iconic look. But, as with many performers, the glitz of the stage required a stable day job. For Kevin, that was working as a maintenance man and janitor at a local medical facility. One ordinary late night in 2001, Kevin was given an unusual assignment: deep cleaning the hospital's morgue. This was highly irregular. He was typically restricted from this sensitive area. After hours of grueling work, Kevin was exhausted and decided to find a quick drink. He located a small refrigerator tucked away in a corner and opened it up. What he saw next was not a water bottle or a soda, but something straight out of a horror film. Inside the refrigerator, alongside medical supplies, were what he strongly believed to be unmarked, illegally harvested human body parts. Arms, legs, hands, feet, and, most disturbingly, a human head. Kevin freaked out. Who wouldn't? He immediately fled the scene. The following day, he couldn't keep quiet. He started telling his colleagues about the grotesque discovery. This wasn't just a maintenance man gossiping. This was a man convinced he'd stumbled upon something deeply illegal and unethical. Word quickly reached the hospital administration. Kevin had been in a restricted area. The next day, he was called into the CEO's office. Waiting for him were not just hospital staff, but several men in suits. They asked Kevin to sign a series of documents, a disciplinary write-up for being in the restricted area. They claimed they were suspending him with pay pending an investigation, but Kevin, feeling cornered and suspicious, refused to sign anything. Immediately, the tone shifted. He was fired on the spot. The termination didn't just hurt Kevin's income, it solidified his terrifying belief. In his mind, the abrupt firing wasn't punishment for a rule violation, it was a cover-up. Why were there unmarked body parts in that fridge? Why the men in suits? To Kevin, there was only one logical explanation. However wild, the hospital was involved in a massive, clandestine black market organ harvesting operation. This wasn't just a dark secret to him. It became a full-blown, all-consuming, tinfoil hat-level conspiracy. He believed the wealthy elite, the powerful, perhaps even groups like the Illuminati, were involved in this nefarious trade. As ridiculous as that sounds to others, Kevin was utterly and completely convinced. His mission became clear. He had to expose the scandal and bring down the operation. He became relentless. He told his story to anyone who would listen. Friends, family, acquaintances. They're secretly selling black market organs at the hospital, he'd declare. But the response was always the same: skepticism, ridicule, and concern. You were in a hospital morgue, buddy. That's where they keep body parts, people would say. His obsession started to invade every aspect of his life. Even while performing as Elvis, he would transition into an angry sermon about the conspiracy and the body parts he'd seen. He poured his energy into the internet, posting extensively on social media and chat forums about the alleged cover-up. He even took his claims to the highest levels he could reach. He met with a local state congressman and even a U.S. senator from Mississippi, Roger Wicker. Both politicians listened, conducted basic due diligence, and ultimately turned him away. They found no credible evidence to support his wild claims. This rejection didn't temper Kevin's belief, it warped it further. He began to believe that the government itself, the people he had trusted to help, were now complicit. They were in on the conspiracy. His desperation and anger intensified, transforming him from a crusader into a genuine, publicly known eccentric. This crusade cost him dearly. As the years passed, 2003, 2004, 2005, his life crumbled. He lost his stable employment and his marriage fell apart. He was now alone, obsessed, and widely viewed as a harmless, albeit angry, lunatic. He was now alone, obsessed, and widely viewed as a harmless, albeit angry, lunatic. He reached out to the owner, a man named James Everett Duchke. Duchke was a complex and busy man. He didn't just own the small-time news outlet, he also ran a taekwondo studio and, critically, was an aspiring politician, actively running for the Mississippi House of Representatives. Kevin sent Duchke an impassioned email detailing his conspiracy. Duchke, however, was immediately wary. As a political hopeful, the last thing he needed was to be associated with a wild, unsubstantiated claim of government black market organ harvesting. It would damage his campaign's credibility. He ignored the email. Kevin followed up with phone calls and voicemails, all of which Duchke ignored. Finally, Kevin tracked him down in person, only to be politely but firmly rejected. This final rejection was the spark that ignited an unstoppable fire. To Kevin, Duchke's rejection wasn't political caution, it was hypocrisy. Duchke claimed his paper would publish anything, yet he wouldn't publish the truth about the conspiracy. Kevin snapped. He viewed Duchke as another elitist complicit in the cover-up. He went home and began a relentless campaign of harassment. He created multiple fake Facebook accounts and started posting videos, photos, and accusations targeting Duchke and his family. Duchke, known to be volatile and retaliatory, decided to fight back. He began stalking Kevin's social media, finding out when and where he was scheduled to perform his Elvis act. Duchke would then call the venues, warning them not to book Kevin, effectively trying to ruin his livelihood. This back-and-forth, petty, and deeply personal rivalry raged for years. It was a vicious cycle of online slights and real-world sabotage. Then, in 2013, the rivalry took a dark turn. Duchke was arrested for exposing himself to school-aged girls. He was eventually sentenced to 90 days in jail. For Kevin, this was vindication. He openly mocked Duchke, capitalizing on the public scandal and posting about it everywhere online, ensuring everyone knew of Duchke's legal troubles. This humiliation was the final straw for Duchke. Sitting in jail, stewing over the public mockery and his ruined political aspirations, he plotted the ultimate revenge. He had to stop Kevin Curtis, the eccentric Elvis impersonator, once and for all, and the only way he saw fit was to frame him for a capital crime. Duchke's plan was as audacious as it was terrifying. It required a deadly poison, ricin. Ricin is a potent toxin derived from the seeds of the castor oil plant. It is relatively easy to make and tragically easy to weaponize. Sometime in early 2013, Duchke acquired castor beans. He secretly ground them into a fine powder, the deadly ricin, using a coffee grinder. He then carefully sealed this lethal powder into envelopes containing handwritten letters. The targets Duchke chose were calculated to make Kevin look like the obvious perpetrator, U.S. Senator Roger Wicker, the man who had refused to listen to Kevin's conspiracy claims years earlier. A local judge who had at one point sentenced Duchke to jail. This was Duchke's target, but using Kevin's motive. And, unbelievably, the President of the United States, Barack Obama. Sending a letter to the President elevated the crime to the highest level possible, attempted assassination. The letters themselves were designed to sound like Kevin. They contained rambling references to the conspiracy and phrases like, "No one would listen to me," and they were essentially signed with Kevin's common online handle, "I am Kevin Curtis." Fortunately, the protocols for handling mail sent to high-profile officials, especially the President, are rigorous. None of the intended recipients, including President Obama, opened the ricin-laced envelopes themselves. The poison was intercepted by specialized mail screening facilities. No one was harmed, but the act itself was a massive federal crime. Because the letter was sent to the President, multiple federal agencies, the FBI, the Secret Service, and the Joint Terrorism Task Force, were immediately involved. They traced the letters back to the sender's name and location, and quickly focused on Paul Kevin Curtis. The evidence was overwhelming. On paper, the letters had Kevin's name handle. Kevin had a known public motive. He was angry at the government and Senator Wicker for ignoring his conspiracy claims. The FBI easily found Kevin's extensive, angry online posts about the hospital conspiracy and government cover-up. To the outside world and the authorities, Kevin Curtis was the perfect suspect, an angry, isolated, and highly volatile conspiracy theorist. So, they arrested him immediately. Kevin Curtis was taken into custody and interrogated by federal agents. Poor Kevin was utterly bewildered. He genuinely didn't know what ricin was. He had no idea what the agents were talking about. He could only repeat his denials and profess his innocence. Hours into the interrogation, the federal agents, trained to spot deception, started to sense something was wrong. Kevin's bewilderment seemed genuine. They pivoted their line of questioning. Do you have any enemies? Anyone who would want to frame you? One name immediately sprang to Kevin's lips. Duchka. The FBI quickly shifted their focus. They found Duchka, the volatile aspiring politician with the checkered past and the long-running bitter feud with Kevin. They brought him in for questioning. A search of Duchka's taekwondo studio turned up damning evidence, traces of ricin powder and the coffee grinder used to process the castor beans. The frame-up was exposed. James Everett Duchke was arrested and, facing a mountain of evidence, eventually took a plea deal. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for producing and possessing a biological toxin and for attempting to use it to frame an innocent man. Kevin Curtis was immediately and completely exonerated. He was released, his life having been utterly ruined, only to be miraculously saved by the persistence of federal investigators. While justice was served, the mental and emotional toll on Kevin was immense. The story of the Elvis impersonator, Paul Kevin Curtis, stands as a terrifying example of how easily a bitter personal feud and an irrational obsession can intersect with a deadly plot, almost sending an innocent man to prison for the rest of his life. But the plot against him, the ricin, the frame-up, the attempted presidential assassination charge, was a terrifying, all-too-real plot orchestrated by a single, bitter rival. Let us know in the comments below. How would you have handled the interrogation if you were in Kevin's shoes?